All right. So for the introduction and Python basics, at the very top is that academic honesty policy. I kind of mentioned that in the welcome video. I now have to do this to make sure students understand there is real repercussions if you cheat. You simply download the PDF file and resubmit it back up. All right. You're going to initial it, sign it, put it up. Hopefully never have to worry about it the rest of the semester. All right. With chapter 0 and the introduction, I encourage you guys to kind of read through a little bit of this so you can get an understanding of what the book's for, what is programming, etc. Does anybody in here have no idea what Python programming is? Does anybody in here never coded whatsoever? Great. All right. So Python itself is a programming language, and there's lots of programming languages out there. You have C, Basic, COBOL, Java, HTML. There's all these different programming languages out there. Python itself is probably the number one, still in the number one spot of programming languages out there. There's other languages. Every language has its own purpose as to why it's used and why it may be better over another language. Python is the most human readable, meaning when you read the code, it reads like you're reading human text. Okay. So it starts at the top and works its way down. And the language, the commands, the things you're using are things that seem fairly human nature. All right. That's why it seems to be the most adopted language out there. All right. So you don't need to know a whole bunch of math like you would in BASIC or C# or C++, etc. The other benefit of Python is it gives you a lot of debugging. It tells you exactly where the errors are, what the errors are, things like that. All right. So listen to the output when we get to coding. It will tell you exactly what's going on at some point in the code. All right. For those of you that never touched this, may be scared of teaching Python, etc. I've taught this to high school students. I've taught this to middle school students. They did awesome with it and did really cool projects. Okay. So you guys should be able to pick up this language. It's one of the easiest languages to pick up. There's a lot of reasons to use Python, no matter what your background is. That's the reason I have science majors over here or math majors, or I've even had nursing majors out here. Is you're able to use Python for a lot of different programs. A lot of different things have APIs and ways to interact with databases that you may be pulling information from. So whether it's a health insurance facility that you're working with as a nursing student, or maybe as a science student, you need to do some geolocation of rocks or things like that, students have come over here and learned Python because they can interact with that. The other part of that is they can automate their job. So the whole basis behind Python and being able to program is your day-to-day repetitive tasks. That's why the name of the book is Automate the Boring Stuff. If you're doing something repetitively, it could probably be programmed to do that. All right. So that is how I got into Python back in the day. When I was out in industry, I was having to constantly hand out username and passwords for a system that I designed. I got tired of doing that, designed a Python program to handle that for me as a web app. It started handing everything out. I was work at home already, so I just enjoyed a lot of movies and other stuff while the program did all the work for me. Got away with that for like 6 months before my boss realized I wasn't showing up to work. All right. It can actually do that. That's true. That's exactly how I learned Python. It's exactly how I learned all the code. I found a way to automate my day-to-day mundane task, and nobody knew the wiser. All right. Let's see. Question popped up. Great. So same way with you guys online. If you got questions, please throw them in the chat. I will see them pop up at the top, and I'll bounce those up. So if you don't want to come off mute, you're more than welcome to send them in the chat. All right. So that's the gist of the book. It does tell you how to install Python and things down here. I'm going to walk you through that. The way I use Python is we use the built-in interpreter, which is idle. Some of you that are coming from computer science may use things like Visual Basic and other things, or not Visual Basic, Visual Studio, other IDEs or interactive development environments. We use idle in this class because it works across everything. It works on a Mac, Mac, PC, and Linux. And so every student should be able to install idle and work with that. All right. If you want to use a different IDE, you're welcome to do that. Just know I can't support it because I got to support the other students that are working on idle. All right. In my advanced class, we use a totally different thing. But for beginner, idle works perfectly and it works on everybody's system. All right. We'll download Python and idle. The book is going to talk about installing Mu. We do not use Mu in this class. All right. Mu works great for what it's for. I use it with actually high school students when they're coding and developing little trinket devices and programming chips and stuff like that. But for a day-to-day driver, idle works a lot better for teaching this class. All right. So don't use mu, even though the book says mu, we're going to use idle like it says up here. Okay. So to get that, back in our Blackboard section, you're going to see the link to go download Python. You'll want to click on that link. This number up here will change, but the gist for this semester is we're going to use Python 3.12. So we'll click on that link. And this will obviously be for Windows, Mac OS, all the other processes are about the same. I encourage you on Windows, if you guys are running Windows 10, Windows 11, download it in this fashion, install it. Don't use the one that's in the Windows App Store. That tends to not work well at all. Students have a lot of issues with it. So I'm going to download this Python file. Really small, get it up, run the executable. All right. Don't just click through everything you see in here. Mine's going to show up a little different because I obviously already have Python installed, but we're going to install the newer version. All right. So you guys should have an install or something here. Go ahead and click on the upgrade now. Actually, don't do that. Stand by. Start this over. That way it's similar to what you guys see. Okay, you should see something like this. You will see an option down here at the bottom for some of you that will say something like path, and it's a checkbox. You must click that checkbox for path. If you forget to do that, it's going to cause some issues later down the semester. All right. If you forget to do that, you get later down the semester, just uninstall Python, reinstall it, click the checkbox, you're fine. All right. So I'm going to click through here and install. You can run multiple versions of Python at the same time. For everybody in this class, that shouldn't be a problem unless you're already coding on Python 3.10 or something like that. For this class, we're going to be using 3.12. All right. It's coming up here. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay. Again, because this is Wednesday already, we didn't get Monday. I'm going to try to speed through this first part. Normally, I don't go this fast as I'm trying to get through stuff. All right. Also, normally doesn't take this long to install it. So cheers to a slow computer this morning. All right. Well, that's doing that. I'm just going to show you the old version. It looks exactly the same. Once you get it installed, you can click on your start button, type idle, IDLE, and you're going to see idle pop up. Now, in my case, I have multiple versions of Python installed. You're going to want the 3.12 version. All right. So I can click on 3.12. And you're going to get here, which is called the interactive shell. All right. So the interactive shell means I can type things in here, hit enter, and it immediately executes that line of code. This is beneficial when you're first starting to learn and adding some commands here. This is not what we will use for our homework assignments. For homework assignments, you go up to File and then New. This starts up a new Python script. All right. So in Python, we use a scripting language, meaning we're going to write a script out, run that script. It will execute the code line by line and spit out whatever we tell it to. Okay. So once you get this up here, again, if we were doing a homework assignment, so for example, if I go back to our Blackboard shell, in our learning modules, you scroll down, you get your assignments, copy and paste this section here, and you're going to paste it at the top of this. All right. You'll notice when you paste that in, that's red. If I type other text, that's black. Anything that's red is a comment, and we'll talk about comments and how those work. But by putting that hashtag in front, that line of code will not get executed. So this is considered a comment. I would put my name in here at the top, and then I can start writing my lines of code down below here. Okay. Always paste that up at the top. Do it out of habit so that you don't forget. Okay. Let's get back to our section here. So now we've got Python installed. We got idle up and working. Of course, mine's still installing extra stuff. That's fine. And that'll get us into chapter 1, which is the basics. So let's look at chapter 1. And that first interactive shell that we were looking with here, again, this is called a REPL, which means it reads that line of code, it evaluates it, and then it prints it out to the end user. Okay, so I did 2 + 2. This evaluates this line of code, spits it out to the end user as to what the final answer is. Okay, again, we will be using the scripting language or the scripting section, which is this over here. All right, little chunks. Again, I don't read all this line for line. I just show you the stuff that matters. It's going to talk about errors. Notice you guys, again, will have errors in all your code. It's completely normal, especially when you're starting out. Pay attention to the errors that come up. It will give you some indication as to what's going on. And trust me, I'll intentionally make errors in this class, and then I'm going to pretend like they were intentional because I will make mistakes as I type. All right, first thing we're going to learn is math operators. All right, you guys probably remember the order of precedence, PEMDAS, that kind of thing from back in your high school math classes. So in Python, we have a double asterisk sign, which refers to an exponent. We have a percentage sign, which is a modulus or a remainder. You have your double slashes, which is your integer division, then regular division, multiplication, subtraction, and addition. It's generally these last couple ones are the ones we deal with the most, right? Notice that they do that in that order so that if we had division first, then it would do multiplication, then subtraction, then addition. Okay. All called the order of operations. Again, PEMDAS, everything we've done. So if you look at these lines of code here, if we did something like 2 + 3 × 6, it's going to do what first? I mean, you can see the answer. So how did they do that first? 3 × 6, right? So multiplication happens first. That ends up being 18. And then you have +2, right? Gives us the 20 that evaluates down to. If we put things around parentheses, it will execute that first. So 2 + 3 is going to be 5. 5 × 6 will end up being 30. All right. And you can see how all the other ones work all the way down. Anybody have any questions over math stuff? All right. You won't do a ton of math in this class. It's actually going to be more text-based. However, if you're dealing with getting a user's age, or maybe you're dealing with grades or something like that that you want to pull in integers from, you will probably do some form of math. All right. Python reads just like typical grammar. So that's one thing I'll have you in this class. Spelling matters, grammar matters, punctuation matters. All of that matters because Python will interpret it accordingly that way. Let's see, a question pop up, multiplication. Great. Okay. That gets us into our first couple data types. So there's 3 main data types that we're going to talk about throughout the entire class. You'll have integers, which are basically whole numbers. All right. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. You have floating point numbers, which are something like -1.25, -1.00, 1.0, etc. All right. -1 and -1.0 are 2 totally different things. All right. They're not equal to one another. They're 2 different data types. One's going to be a whole number. One's going to be a floating point. Everybody got that? Okay. We also have strings. Now, strings are identified with either single quotes around them or double quotes. All right. Single quotes, for example, an A, a double A, triple A. If I have a 1 in single quotes, that is a string, not an integer. Kind of see the difference? So what that would look like in here, this is an integer, this is a floating point, and this is a string. Notice when I do numbers or integers, they're black. If I do a string, it turns green. Okay, so idle's all color coded. It's a great way to double check, make sure you got the right thing. You can use single quotes or double quotes. It doesn't matter. All right. I'll explain that a little bit more in the semester, but for now, you can use either one of those. And you will see me use them interchangeably within what I'm coding. Sometimes I'll use double, sometimes I'll use single. It doesn't really matter as long as you use the same on either side. Okay. All right. So that gives us integers, floating points, and strings. If you forget your string at the end of that, something like that, and I try to run this code, so I go to run module, it's always going to ask if you want to save it first. You have to save it. So we hit OK. The place that it wants you to save it is always in this Python directory. Never save files in this Python directory. It will cause you tons of headache later on down the road. All right. Create a folder on your desktop, my documents folder, whatever you want for Python 360 class. Keep your homework assignments in that section. All right. So if I click out here and I'm just going to store it, whatever this is for this class, 360, and then I can call this something like assignment 1. Okay. Now, is that how I call it? No, right? I need to put my name on it. So Jason Zeller, assignment 1, and I can hit save. Okay. When I run that code, it's going to say an unreturned string literal detected at line 7. What does that mean? It basically is saying that there's an issue on line 7 that I need to find. So you can either count these, which is going to be difficult, or you can go up here to options, show line numbers, and it's going to show you what line number that code's on. Okay. Every time it has an error, it's going to tell you what error that line is on. So it's nice to tell it to show line numbers so you can see that. You can also tell down here at the bottom, when you click, it will tell you what line you're on down here in the lower right. But it's nice to just hit show line numbers and you can see that over here. So if I put this quote here and then I run this, you will see that it ran it, but nothing came out. Well, it's because I didn't tell it to do anything, right? So if I do something like, say, 1 + 1, and then run this code, again, nothing comes out to the user. The reason for this is we did not print anything back to the user, right? It's executing 1 + 1, but it's not doing anything with it. So we have to make sure we wrap that in a print statement. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. When we deal with strings, we have, if you forget one, you have this end of line scanning for a literal. All that means is you forgot a quote somewhere. Okay. We also have string concatenation and string replication. String concatenation allows us to add, in quotes, 2 strings together. So if I have the string Alice and I have the string Bob and I want to concatenate or put those together, I can use the plus sign. That plus sign is not the same thing as add, right? I can't add 2 words together. I can only add integers together or floating type values together. So while it looks like I'm adding this, it's just a plus sign. Why does that matter? Later down the road when you guys are coding, some people think this is adding. It's not, right? It's string concatenation. So when you see this on a quiz down the road, something like that, you're not adding 2 words together, you're concatenating them together. Anybody got any questions on that part? Okay. If you try to add something like a string and an integer together, it's going to tell you you have an error, and I can only concatenate strings, not integers, to strings. So I can only concatenate strings to strings. I cannot put an integer to a string. Everybody understand that? All right. Last one is string replication, which allows us to take the string Alice. Say I want to repeat that 5 times. I can shortcut by saying times 5, and it will give me this as the output. Alice, 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 Alice. All right. And you can put whatever number you want out there. You cannot string replicate between 2 strings. So I can't say Alice times Bob. It will give me an error there. If I try to say Alice times 5.0, which is a, what's 5.0? Floating point, right? I cannot multiply by a floating point. It must be an integer. All right. Anybody got any questions on that stuff? Again, if I talk through it too fast this semester, go watch last semester's video. Okay. Storing values and variables. So a variable is the biggest thing that we're going to store that in. You can think of it like a box. All right. We're going to store something in that box that we want to retrieve later on in our program. So to do that, we use an assignment operator, which is our case, an equal sign. All right. So if I have the variable spam, which is just the word spam, you'll see that in here. So spam equals 1. From now on, anywhere I use the word spam, it acts as the value of 1. So if I say 1 plus spam, that will actually give me what? 2, right? It's not a string. Notice how I don't have quotes around it. It will actually say 1 plus 1. And if I put that into something like, say, a print statement and run this code, you will see we get 2 out on the screen. All right. In this code, you have spam equals 1. I then use a print function in order to print the answer back out to the user. So I say 1 plus spam inside these parentheses, use that as a print function. It spits out whatever the answer is. So I could just do 1 plus 1. I could also do print 1 plus spam. I could even do other math. So I could do something like spam times 5. And I can get all that in there. So if I run this, you're going to see I get 225 based on 2, 2, and 5. Okay. So this is called an assignment. All right. We're assigning this value, which is spam. We're going to assign that the value of 1, which is an integer. I could assign it a string or something like this, right? So to make more sense out of this, we use something like name. And maybe I have a name of Jason. And I have a last name of Zeller. Let's put that in quotes. And I could do a string concatenation where I add those two together. So I could do something like print name plus last name. And if I run that, it will put that together. Now, it says spam not defined, right? Does anybody see why that happened? I got rid of spam up here where I had spam equals 1. So notice that when it tries to use spam on line 10, which is this first line here, really, it can't find the word spam. It has no value anymore. Therefore, the program will crash. When you see this red, that means your program crashed. All right. In this case, it's going to call it a name error, which means spam's not defined. I could come up here and redefine it, put 1, run this code again, and you'll see it did everything we wanted it to do. So we have math going on here, and then we have string concatenation to print those two out. Anybody have any questions on that so far? Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's the only way I can judge whether you're absorbing anything. All right. If we say something like spam equals 40 and we check on spam, we would get 40 back. If we say eggs is equal to 2 and then we say spam plus eggs, that will give us 42. If we say spam plus eggs plus spam gives us 82. We can also reassign spam. So we could say spam is now equal to spam plus 2, which will then give us what? 42 down here, right? Spam was originally 40. We're going to add 2 to that and reassign that to spam. So now it's 42. Anybody got any questions on that thus far? Okay. So again, we can reassign variable names by just using the equal sign. So in this case, I have last name and name up here. Let's now call this first name. And we can change this to first name. And then if I wanted to, I could have something like whole name equals first name plus last name. Now you'll notice when it actually did that kind of stuff, if I do something like print whole name, it puts my two names together, right? And note there's no space in the middle. If I wanted it to put a space in the middle, I would need to concatenate a space in between. So I would do something like first name plus, and then a space inside of quotes, plus last name. So that's going to take my first name, then concatenate that with just an empty space, then concatenate that with my last name. And if I run that, I can see that it now put a space in between there. Okay, that gets us through that. For variable names, you'll notice I called it spam. I called it first name, last name. There is there's a list of valid names. Notice how I always did it in lowercase. So variable names should always be in lowercase. So valid ones would be things like current underscore balance or current and then capital B for the balance. You can do that. That's called camel case. What you can't do is have a space between the variable names. You can't have a hyphen. You can start with letters, but you cannot start with a number. You can start with an underscore, but you cannot start with a number. And then you can be all caps with an underscore. Although you cannot use special characters like this here, I would always try to go with lowercase variable names like this one here. You cannot use a variable name with a single quote in it because that makes it a what? String, right? So you can't use special characters that are already used in Python. Everything is case sensitive and variable names matter. So lowercase spam, uppercase spam, spam with a capital S, camel casing in the middle, those are all different variable names. All right. So when, just like most spelling, everything's case sensitive inside Python. All right. So if you put something in there that is not the exact way it's supposed to, it will not like it. It will not accept it. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, that's going to get us to our first program and our first way of getting something out. So if we look at this code, and the book will give you little chunks of code like this, we're going to create something very similar. So we're going to say something like print, hello, my name is Jason. All right. Then we can say print, what is your name? And then we'll have something like name equals input. What that does is it takes whatever the user types in, and we're going to store it in the variable called name. Notice how I'm always using variable names that make sense. All right. You could store this as variable A, but the problem is you don't know what A is later down the road, right? And when you start getting hundreds of lines of code, A is going to be very confusing. So use something like name if you're going to pull in a name from a user. We get that user from the input statement. I'll cover this here in a little bit and explain that code. For now, we're just going to pull it in, and then we're going to say print, you said your name was. Okay. So let's run this, see what it looks like, and then I'll explain some code. You'll see that we get 2 lines. We get the first one. My name's Jason. What's your name? Let's just throw in Sam here. And it says your name was Sam. Notice it didn't put a period at the end, and it kind of didn't quote it right. So if we look over here, we use print statements to print out a question or a greeting. We have a question. We store whatever they type in as name. And in this case, let's put that over there. So when input, all this is doing is making it nice and clean so that the user knows that there's a place for them to type something. If we don't do that, it's just an empty space. You could do it either way. Doesn't matter. It just makes it nice and clean and easy to read this way. This last one is going to take whatever they typed in on print and add it to the end here. And then let's add a period after that. So let's run that. And so now if I type in a name like Sam, you'll see you said your name was Sam. Now I could rerun this code and I could type in gibberish, and it's just going to print it out whatever I typed in, right? It doesn't care. All right. Does everybody see this real simple code that we got started here? Okay. If we look back at our homework assignment, this is the way I do homework assignments. It's going to tell you what's required. I don't tell you what you have to type. Make these homework assignments a little bit fun, meaning make them your own. There's no right answer as to this. If you say ask for their name, you could ask for their age, you could ask for whatever you want to. I don't care. All right. The assignments are always open-ended. You just have to meet these rubric requirements. So what I always recommend is that you copy these up here and you put them at the top of your homework assignment. So you have assignment 1, we paste these in, we put a hashtag in front of them, which comments them out for users. And then you know what you need to do. That way you don't have to flip back and forth between Blackboard to see what you're supposed to do. Just put it right there at the top of your homework assignment. All right, it says first point, initial comments. That is this up here at the top. All right. The second one is use a print function to display a welcome and prompt the user to, or prompt a question to the user. Well, we have that here, right? We have a welcome and we're asking them some kind of question. It then says use the input function and store in a variable called my input. Notice that my input is lowercase, the I is capitalized. I stored it as name. So I would need to change this to my input. And then over here, when I want to use the print function to print the contents out, I would need to change this also to my input. All right. It then wants you, so far, you guys have already got half the homework assignment done. All right. It's really that simple for this first homework. The next part is use 2 different math operators from table 1-1 in your script somehow. Those may be used to manipulate some kind of number or something like that. So what does that mean? Well, let's ask them their age, right? So print, what is your age? And then we're going to want to store that. So we'll say age equals input. And let's put that fancy prompt in there. And then we need to do something with that age. So we are going to assume that they type in a number at this point. All right. There's no error checking. You guys haven't learned any of that kind of stuff yet. You're just going to assume they type in some kind of integer. At the top bottom here, we'll do something like print your age plus 5 is, right? And then we're going to concatenate something where we take in their age and we're going to add 5 to it. All right. Everybody see what I got there? All right. When we run this, it's going to start from the top, ask me what my name is. And then when it asks for my age, I put in a number like 22, I get an error. And the reason I get an error is because every input always comes in as a string. All right. Even though I typed in a number for age, it's always a string in Python. So we need to convert that string over to an integer so that we can do math to it. All right. So to do that, we use the int function and we wrap that in age. So what we're doing is we're taking this age statement, we're going to convert that to an integer, then we're going to add 5 to it. Okay. So let's try running that. I got a name of Sam, age of 22. Now I get a different error because it cannot concatenate the age that it calculated back into this whole string. All right, so let's break this out so it's not so confusing. Let's do something like age 5 years equals age plus 5. We know we need to convert this to an integer, so let's do that. Okay, and if we just print it out, age 5 years, we should get that value back. So for now, I'm just going to comment this line of code out. We have something like Jason, age of 22, and it just prints out 27. All right. We don't have any text to tell it this is the age in 5 years, but it does give us the value. Age 5 years is now 27. So to print that, we would do something like print your age plus 5 is, and then we just take our new one, which is age 5 years. We need to convert that back to a string. So we will use the str command, which will convert that integer to a string, right? And as long as it's a valid integer, it'll convert it over to a string. So now if we run this code, you will see something like Sam, age of 22, and now it prints out 27 because we left this print statement in. So we can remove that, rerun it. You have Sam, 22, and now it says your age plus 5 is 27. Okay. We also need to make sure we get a period at the end of this. So let's do a plus. throw a period in there, and now our sentence is grammatically correct. And we can say Sam 22, age plus 5 is 27. All right. This right here is where I use that math operator. So what you can do is you can leave these comments at the top, or you can copy and paste them where you actually did them. So if I move this one here and say use my print statement to welcome and ask a question, that's basically these 2 lines of code. Then I'm supposed to use an input to store the variable as my input. That's this line of code. It says your name is out. That was this particular one. And then we are now asking what's your age. So at this point, we're supposed to use 2 different math operators, right? So let's copy that. That is done here where we're adding 5 to that age, right? Let's say subtract 10. So when we say age 10 years equals the int of whatever age they typed in minus 10. And then we could have a second print statement that says the correct way. So your age minus 10. And then you can come in here and say age 10 years. And then run this code. And so now we have Sam. And then we say your age is 22. Your age plus 5 is 27. Your age minus 10 is 12. Okay. Very simple, but this covers your 2 math operators. We did addition and we did subtraction. Note, this is not addition down here. This is what? When we use a plus sign inside of a bunch of strings, that's called, anybody remember? What was it? Yep, string concatenation. All right, if I used a multiple sign here, that would be string. Anybody remember the other one? Replication, right? So string concatenation is the plus signs down here. This one up here is dealing with integers, therefore it's a math operator. So where a lot of students will mess up in this first homework assignment is they think that this counts as one of their math operators. It doesn't. Only when you do it on integers up here does it count as a math operator. Same symbol, 2 different things. All right, at the very end here, it says that we need to use string concatenation somewhere in our project. You're actually going to do that multiple times, but we can go ahead and put that down here and show that these are for that point. All right, so you can leave these at the top. You can delete those. And now you have each section telling you where that code is valuable. So we can go in here. We can print that out to the user and get their age. Okay. Anybody have any questions on this first part? Yeah, please. Okay, yep. So the only reason I'm doing this here is you'll notice it gives a prompt here. If I take that out and I just do an input here and an input here, and then run this, you'll notice the difference is now there's no symbol for me to type against. I just have to know to type something, right? Now notice if I type in anything other than a number, my program crashes. At this point, that's fine because you guys have no way of saying, is this a number, right? We'll figure that out kind of thing later on. But that's the difference between what I had before. So if I go back, it looks like this and we run it. That is just giving me a prompt character for that. You could use whatever you wanted. You could use a hashtag if you wanted to. You could use a % sign if you wanted to, whatever you want to give a prompt to the user. If you wanted, you could actually say type here. Right? And when it runs and executes, it's going to display that out to the user. All right? You can also ask your question. So if you want your question in line, notice how when I ask this question, it's before the line I'm typing in. You could also ask that in line, in which case I would take this question and put it inside my input statement and always put a space at the end so it's not smashed up against it. And now if I run this code, you'll notice now it's prompting it in line for that question, right? For the homework assignment, it wanted you to specifically use the print statement to ask the first question. So make sure you use just a regular input at that point. Something like that. You can do your inputs however you want. There's no set way to do this. You could ask them their age. You could ask them what grade level they're in, subtract it, add 1 billion years, add 10 years. You do whatever you want. All right. All these homework assignments are open-ended, so you can have as much fun with this. This is the bare minimum to get the homework assignment. If you go beyond this and have fun with it, that's perfectly fine. All right. I encourage you to keep going through it because the more practice you do with this, the better and easier it's going to be later in the semester. A lot of times students will have fun with it. They have a favorite TV show they're watching and they'll ask questions about the favorite TV show or a board game they love or a book they love. That's fine. Have fun with it because what you'll realize is you're trying to figure out how the code works. And the more you play with it, the faster and easier it gets. Right? Any questions about this first assignment? All right. When I have this done, I have to make sure I named it correctly, right? So I have Jason Zeller assignment 1. If I go back out here, I can then click on this down arrow or not the down arrow, but on assignment and submit that Python file directly here. Okay. Note, you're going to submit that Python file. Do not use the output. So don't send me this output, right? I want the actual script file, this .py file that you're using over here. Because I'm going to download this file and I will run it and I will get the output as desired. Right? If we look back in Blackboard, that's it for this semester. Or for the semester. That's it for this class. Now, one thing at the bottom of each one of these, as you scroll down, read through these. If you're struggling on the assignments or you're struggling with the content, feel free to read more out of the book. All right. I only have 1 hour and 15 and I'm trying to live code on this. I can't read every single word out of the book, nor would you guys want me to do that. Right. It is going to talk about comments. So again, anything with a hashtag is the comments. It talks about the print function, which I already kind of described how that worked. You have the input function, and then you have a len function. So the len function here allows us to calculate the length of something. So say I type in something like, I have my age. Let's do this. So you said your name was this. You could say print, or let's do this, length of name equals the len of my input, right? So we said, give us your name. I'm going to calculate the length of that input. So if they typed in Jason, it would be what? How many characters are in the word Jason? 5, right? So then we could turn around and say something to the user like print, you have length of name. That's going to look something like this. We need to convert that to a string. Characters in your name. All right. Put a space on there, run this. And then whatever I type in here. So if I type in Matilda, whoops, I hit the wrong button with my hand. Let's run that again here. All right. You said your name was Matilda. There's 7 characters in your name. I can get a new age. Adds 5, still minus 10. All right. So the len function is helpful for calculating the length of whatever characters are in there. That may be the length of your name. It may be the length of an entire passage that you pass to it. Could be the length of anything. All right. We talked about the different functions of converting things to string, converting things to integers, and converting things to float. So if I wanted to convert an integer to a float, I could use the float function. You can always convert integers and floats into strings. You cannot always convert a string into an integer and a float, right? Because if I have a string Jason, I can't convert that to an integer, right? But if I have the string of 4, I can convert that to an integer of 4. I can convert that into a float of 4.0. So these are your 3 functions for converting between the different data types. All right. Is there anything else important out of here? That's about it. At the bottom of the chapters, there are always going to be these nice practice questions. When you're first getting started, it's nice to answer these so that you can get caught up and feel like you know the information. In later chapters, there will be practice examples or practice scripts that you can do. I encourage you to do those if you're struggling. Go through those practice examples so you can see how it works. All right. Anybody have any questions? All right, I'm going to stop this recording.